Triplets are about to be taken by the orphanage, but the billionaire steps in front and shouts, "They're coming with me." Harrison Cole adjusted his wristwatch as he left the restaurant, 7:30 in the evening, on the dot. As always, his life worked like a well-oiled machine. No surprises, no detours, no outside interference, exactly the way he had planned it. The night was clear, but the air carried that humidity that precedes rain. Harrison decided to walk a bit before calling his driver, a small deviation in his routine, nothing significant. Just a few extra minutes before returning to the security of his mansion. Downtown streets were busier than he would have liked. Rushed people, brightly lit storefronts, loud conversations. Harrison kept his eyes fixed on the path ahead, avoiding eye contact with anyone passing by. He was never good with people. He preferred numbers, contracts, spreadsheets, things that made sense, that followed clear rules. His phone vibrated in his pocket, probably some urgent email, but it could wait. At that moment, Harrison just wanted the silence he found within himself as he walked through the urban chaos. An island of isolation in the midst of an ocean of human interactions he had never fully understood. That was when he heard it. A sound that pierced his defenses like a well-aimed arrow, crying. Not just any crying, but the desperate, gut-wrenching kind that comes from the deepest parts of someone who hasn't yet learned to hide their pain. Harrison stopped. He turned his head toward the noise almost instinctively, going against his habit of ignoring distractions. Across the street, in front of an administrative building, 3 little girls were being placed into a white van bearing the logo of Child Protective Services. Their tiny hands were clasped tightly together, as though trying to fuse into a single person. 2 women, with tired expressions that spoke of a long, difficult day, were gently trying to separate them so they could seat them in the vehicle. "Please, I don't want to go alone," shouted the middle one, dark-haired and wide-eyed, her tears shimmering. "We promised we'd stay together, we promised," sobbed the smallest, a fragile child with messy braids. "We can't go to different places," begged the tallest, trying to keep her composure, but with her chin trembling visibly, even from where Harrison stood. "Girls," one of the women explained, her voice gentle but firm. "We only have one family willing to take one of you right now. The others will go to temporary foster homes until we find permanent solutions." Harrison couldn't move. Something strange was happening inside him. It felt as though a knot, tied long ago in his chest, was starting to unravel. He realized he was holding his breath. "But we promised, Mom," said the middle girl, her voice dropping to a devastating whisper. "We promised we'd never separate." It was as if an invisible wall came crashing down. Harrison Cole, who had spent the last 15 years meticulously building a life of detachment, measuring every social interaction with the precision of a clockmaker, found himself crossing the street without making a conscious decision to do so. "Excuse me," he heard his own voice before he even understood what he was doing. The 2 women turned, surprised. The girls froze, still clinging to each other. "May I help you?" asked one of the employees, adjusting the badge that read Department of Children's Services. Harrison felt the absurdity of the situation. He didn't know these children. He knew nothing about taking care of kids. He had never wanted children. His house was a sanctuary of silence and order. And yet, there he was, looking straight into those 3 pairs of frightened eyes that, in some impossible-to-explain way, seemed to look back at him as if they already knew him. "They're coming with me," he said, the words pouring out as though they had a will of their own. The employee blinked, confused. "I'm sorry, sir, but these children are in state custody. You can't just—" Harrison pulled out his wallet. "Harrison Cole," he introduced himself, handing over his business card. "I can guarantee proper accommodation and financial resources to care for these children. I'd like to avoid them being separated." The next few minutes were a blur of questions, phone calls, identity checks. Harrison answered mechanically, as if he were in a particularly complex business negotiation. A distant part of his mind screamed that this was madness, that he should turn his back and continue his walk, call his driver, return to his perfectly organized life. But something stronger kept him there, firm in his unexpected decision. "We have protocols, Mr. Cole. We can't just hand over children to anyone who—" "I fully understand," he replied, keeping his voice calm. "I'm willing to follow all necessary procedures. You can run all the inspections and checks you need, but these children will not be separated today." The girls watched the scene, still intertwined, as if they feared that 1 second of inattention would result in separation. After more phone calls and a conversation with someone apparently higher in rank, the older employee sighed. "Well, Mr. Cole, your name and position make things easier, I admit. Under extraordinary circumstances, we can allow an emergency temporary guardianship, provided you agree to appear in family court on Monday to formalize the paperwork." She fixed him with a serious stare. "You'll need to undergo evaluations and possibly take a preparatory course for foster or adoptive parents. Do you understand that?" Harrison nodded, still unable to believe what he was doing. "And if we find any irregularity, or if the girls aren't being well cared for, they'll be removed immediately. Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear," he replied. The employee then turned to the girls, crouching down to their level. "Juniper, Maisie, Tess, this gentleman has offered to take all 3 of you together. You'll stay at his house tonight, and we'll come by tomorrow to see how you're doing. Is that okay?" The 3 looked at Harrison with wary eyes, but it was the tallest who took a small step forward. "All of us? Together?" "Yes," Harrison answered, feeling a strange tightness in his throat. "All of you. Together." The girls exchanged looks, a silent communication that spoke of a deeper connection than Harrison could comprehend. "My house is 20 minutes from here," he added, not knowing what else to say. "It has plenty of space." The smallest of the 3, who was still clinging tightly to the middle sister's hand, gave a tiny nod. The others followed, a collective decision made in silence. While Harrison signed a stack of preliminary documents, the employees placed a few worn-out backpacks beside the girls. "Everything they own," the younger employee explained quietly. "It's not much." Harrison called his driver, who arrived in minutes, clearly surprised to see his employer accompanied, but too professional to comment. The ride to the mansion was silent. The 3 girls huddled in the back seat of the luxury car, squeezed together as though trying to take up as little space as possible, staring out the windows with expressions that mixed fear and fascination. Harrison sat in the front seat, unsure what to say, suddenly feeling like a stranger in his own life. When the car passed through the wrought iron gates and went up the long circular drive, stopping in front of the grey stone mansion, Harrison heard a small collective gasp. "Is it a castle?" whispered the middle one, the one the employee had called Maisie. "It's just a house," Harrison replied, uncomfortable with the undeserved admiration. "Let's go inside." He led them up the marble steps to the main door, unlocked it, and entered, noticing for the first time how his home might appear to a child's eyes, large, cold, almost intimidating in its elegant minimalism. Marble statues, abstract artwork, very few signs that a human being actually lived there. The girls stepped in tentatively, clutching their battered backpacks to their chests like shields. "You can take off your shoes," he said, noticing their worn-out sneakers, and "welcome." The word sounded strange on his lips. When was the last time he'd said welcome to anyone in his house? Had he even invited anyone in during the last few years? "It's cold in here," commented the tallest aunt, who must be Juniper. Harrison realized she was right. He always kept the temperature low, preferring to wear a sweater rather than overheat the environment. "I can adjust the thermostat," he answered, walking to the panel on the wall. "Is this better?" The 3 nodded, still standing in the same spot, like little statues. "You must be hungry," he said, though he had no idea what to offer. His refrigerator rarely contained more than the essentials for his own simple meals. "We're fine," Juniper replied, as though afraid to be a bother, but her stomach betrayed her, growling audibly in the mansion's silence. Harrison checked his watch, almost 9 at night. Probably late for children to be awake, he supposed, though he wasn't sure. "Maybe you should have something light to eat and then rest," he suggested. "It's been a difficult day." He led them to the kitchen, immaculately clean and rarely used to its full capacity. He opened the fridge, finding milk, cheese, a few eggs. "Sandwiches," he offered, feeling strangely inadequate. The girls nodded in unison. Harrison started to prepare something simple, slicing bread, glancing sideways as they remained close to each other, never moving more than a few inches apart. "You can sit down," he told them, pointing to the high stools at the kitchen island. Reluctantly, they obeyed, climbing up with some difficulty. The smallest, Tess, needed Maisie's help to settle. "Do you like cheese?" asked Harrison, trying to establish some sort of communication. "Yes, sir," Juniper replied, too formal for such a small child. "You can call me Harrison," he said, feeling uncomfortable with the formality. "And you're Juniper, Maisie, and Tess, right?" They all nodded. "I'm the oldest," said Juniper, as though that explained her protective stance. "By 5 minutes," Maisie added with a slight eye roll, the first hint of personality Harrison noticed. "We're triplets," Tess said quietly. "We were born together." Harrison paused what he was doing for a second. "Triplets," he repeated, surprised. At first glance, they didn't look that much alike. Juniper was the tallest, with straight brown hair down to her shoulders. Maisie had dark curls framing a rounder face. Tess was the smallest, more delicate, with partially undone braids. "Identical on the inside," Maisie said with a small seriousness. "That's what our mom always said." The silence that followed was loaded with a sadness Harrison didn't know how to address. Instead, he placed the sandwiches on plates and handed them out, along with glasses of milk. The girls ate slowly, with a careful politeness that seemed incongruent with their worn-out clothes. Harrison realized he was observing their every move with a curiosity he hadn't felt in years, maybe decades. "All done?" he asked when he saw the empty plates. "Then we should set up somewhere for you to sleep." He guided them down the hallway to one of the guest suites he never used. The room was spacious, decorated in neutral tones, with 2 perfectly made twin beds, crisp sheets, and flawless pillows. They stopped at the door, looking at the separate beds with expressions Harrison couldn't immediately decipher. It was Tess who verbalized the problem. "Can we sleep together?" she asked, so softly Harrison almost didn't hear. "We always sleep together," Maisie added. Harrison looked at the beds, separated by a bedside table. They weren't meant to hold more than 1 person each. "I think we can fix that," he said, surprising himself with his willingness to disrupt the perfectly arranged room. He moved the bedside table aside, pushing it into a corner, and then began shoving the 2 beds together. The girls watched in silence, still standing by the door as if afraid to fully enter unfamiliar territory. "It's still not big enough for 3, Harrison muttered, more to himself than to them. "Hang on a minute." He left the room and returned shortly afterward, carrying extra blankets, pillows, and a thick, soft comforter. Under their curious gazes, he fashioned a large nest on the floor, between the now united beds and the wall, creating a sort of improvised sleeping area big enough to accommodate all 3 together. "Is this better?" he asked, feeling strangely anxious for their approval. For the first time since arriving, a small smile appeared on Tess's face. "It looks cozy," she said. "There's a bathroom right there," Harrison said, pointing to a door inside the room. "There are new toothbrushes in the drawer under the sink." He left the room to give them some privacy, lingering in the hallway without knowing exactly what to do with himself. Through the slightly open door, he could hear them whispering, the sound of running water, tiny footsteps on the bathroom's marble floor. When he returned, they were already settled in the big nest of blankets, Tess in the middle, protected by Juniper and Maisie on either side. They were huddled together, as if the world might still collapse around them. "Is it comfortable?" he asked, unsure of the protocol for putting children to bed. The 3 nodded, looking at him with a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "Thank you for not letting us be separated," said Juniper finally, her voice carrying a maturity beyond her years. Harrison felt something strange in his chest, a tightness, a warmth, an emotion he couldn't name. "You're welcome," he replied simply. "Good night." He hesitated for a moment, then switched off the main light, leaving only a small lamp on. He left the door partially open, not fully. For some reason, it seemed important to leave a sliver of light shining in. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall, feeling the weight of his actions fall on him like an avalanche. What had he done? 3 children were sleeping in his house. 3 children he hadn't even known existed a few hours earlier. Harrison ran a hand over his face, trying to organize his thoughts. Monday would come soon. He would have to go to court. He would have to make decisions. What would he say that he had acted on impulse? That something in those girls' cries had touched a part of him he hadn't known existed. He walked to his office and poured himself a drink. The whiskey burned his throat, but didn't bring the clarity he'd hoped for. He had no idea what he would do next. He knew nothing about being responsible for lives other than his own. His house wasn't a place for children. His life had no room for the chaos, the noise, the unpredictability that three small people would inevitably bring. But one thing was certain, he thought, as he stared at the amber liquid in his glass. His life would never be the same. For better or for worse, Harrison Cole had broken the carefully constructed pattern of his existence. And now he was in completely uncharted territory. He looked out his office window into the dark night beyond. Somewhere upstairs, 3 hearts were beating with a trust he wasn't sure he deserved. What would he do next? He had no idea, but he knew he couldn't turn back. The clock read 6 in the morning when Harrison woke up, as usual. For a moment, in the silence of his bedroom, he almost forgot he was no longer alone in the mansion. Then reality returned in force. 3 children were sleeping upstairs. His reflection in the bathroom mirror looked the same as always, but something had changed. He felt different, as if he'd crossed an invisible line between who he was and who he now needed to be. After getting dressed, he stopped in front of the guest room. Should he wake them, let them sleep longer? He had no idea how kids' routines worked, let alone children who had just gone through such a drastic change. He decided to make breakfast first. That at least seemed practical. In the immaculate kitchen, he analyzed the fridge's contents with a critical eye. Eggs, milk, some fruit. What did kids eat for breakfast? He assumed pancakes would be a safe bet. Shouldn't be too hard, he muttered to himself, fishing his phone from his pocket to look up a recipe. Flour, eggs, milk, baking powder. Looked simple enough. Harrison rarely cooked. His breakfast was usually a minimalist affair of strong coffee and toast, or something prepared by his housekeeper, who came 3 times a week. But it was Sunday. He was on his own. He began mixing the ingredients, following the phone's instructions. The batter seemed oddly thick. He added more milk. Now it was too runny, more flour. A cycle that repeated until the bowl was almost overflowing with batter of questionable consistency. Maybe cereal would be simpler, he thought, setting the bowl aside. That was when he heard it, light footsteps, almost imperceptible, coming down the stairs. He turned to find 3 pairs of curious eyes peeking around the kitchen door. "Good morning," Harrison said, trying to sound casual, as if making breakfast for 3 children was something he did every day. "Good morning, sir," replied Juniper, as formal as ever. The 3 of them were already dressed, though Harrison noticed they wore the same clothes as the day before. "You can call me Harrison," he reminded them, gesturing for them to come in. "I was trying to make pancakes, but I think cereal might be more doable." Maisie looked at the bowl of strange batter and wrinkled her nose. "Can I help?" she offered. "Mom used to let us help make breakfast." Harrison hesitated. The idea of kids in his pristine kitchen, with the potential to spill, break, and make a mess, made him deeply uncomfortable. But the alternative was to continue with his failed attempt. "All right," he agreed, stepping back. "What do you suggest?" To his surprise, the girls moved around the kitchen with surprising efficiency. Juniper got a new bowl while Maisie discarded the failed attempt. Tess, the smallest, pulled a stool over so she could reach the counter. "We need 1 cup of flour, not too full," Maisie instructed, "and 2 eggs, and a little bit of sugar." Harrison watched, fascinated, as 3 small children worked in harmony, apparently used to this routine. Juniper cracked the eggs carefully, Maisie measured out the dry ingredients, and Tess stirred the mixture with intense concentration. 15 minutes later, an impressive stack of golden pancakes sat in the middle of the table. They weren't perfectly round, but they smelled delicious. "Did you do this often?" Harrison asked, pouring orange juice into 4 glasses. "Whenever there was food, yes," Juniper answered simply, as she cut small pieces for Tess. The reply hit Harrison like a punch to the gut. Of course, these children had lived in circumstances he could barely imagine. Their cooking skills didn't come from a privileged childhood with loving parents teaching family recipes, but from necessity. Breakfast proceeded in an awkward silence. Harrison tried to start conversations a few times, but his questions, "Did you sleep well?" or "Are you comfortable?" were met with short, monosyllabic answers. After they finished eating, the girls immediately began clearing the table, stacking plates and taking them to the sink. "You don't have to do that," Harrison said quickly. "You can go play or something." The three exchanged glances. "Play with what?" Tess asked, so quietly Harrison almost didn't hear. He looked around. His house had no toys, no children's books, nothing to entertain kids. It was a space created by an adult for adults, sterile, organized, completely unsuited for his new temporary residence. "Oh, well, maybe you can watch TV," he suggested, sounding more like a question than an offer. He led them to the living room, where a huge flat-screen TV took up half of one wall. He handed the remote to Juniper and backed away, relieved to have solved the problem for now. "I'll be in my office if you need anything," he said, already retreating. An hour later, immersed in financial reports he'd been putting off, Harrison noticed a growing noise coming from the living room. He frowned, trying to concentrate, but the sound persisted, a mixture of laughter, chatter, and what seemed like furniture being dragged around. When he finally went to investigate, he stopped at the doorway, stunned. The once minimalist living room had been transformed. The couch cushions were on the floor, forming a pathway. The sleek coffee table had been pushed aside, creating open space in the middle. And, to his horror, his expensive design and architecture magazines lay scattered on the floor, some pages folded into mini-tents. "What is going on here?" he asked, his voice louder than he intended. The three girls froze mid-play. Tess, who had been hopping from one cushion to another, almost lost her balance. "We were playing Don't Touch the Floor," Maisie explained, as though it were obvious. "The floor is lava." Harrison looked at his torn-apart living room, at the carefully curated items now repurposed as props for a children's game. He felt a wave of irritation rise in his chest. These magazines cost more than... He stopped himself, realizing he was about to say something inappropriate. "You can't just mess everything up like this." The joy vanished from their faces. Juniper immediately started gathering the magazines, her movements quick and efficient. Maisie replaced the cushions on the sofa. Tess stood still, shoulders slumped, as though trying to take up less space. Harrison felt a pang of guilt. It wasn't their fault. They were children, after all. Children stuck in a house that had nothing designed for them. "Look," he tried again, softening his tone. "Just, please don't touch my things without asking, okay? Some of them are fragile or important." "I'm sorry," Juniper mumbled. "It won't happen again." Harrison nodded, uncomfortable, and went back to his office, closing the door behind him. Through the solid wood, the silence that followed seemed louder than the previous chaos. In the days that followed, the situation only got worse. Harrison tried working remotely, but his concentration was constantly interrupted. Not by noise. The girls had become almost ghost-like, moving around the house in absolute silence as though afraid of being noticed. It was that silence itself that bothered him, reminding him constantly of their presence, of the responsibility he had impulsively taken on. On Wednesday, he found small figurines made of toilet paper tubes and paper clips scattered around the hallway. On Thursday, he discovered his pens had been used to draw on the backs of some important documents. On Friday, an expensive vase was almost knocked over when a makeshift ball of rolled-up socks bounced off the wall. Each incident increased his irritation, not necessarily toward the girls, but toward the situation itself. He wasn't prepared for this. His house wasn't prepared for this. His life had no room for the inevitable chaos that children brought. "I made a mistake," he admitted to himself, as he watched the three sitting quietly in the garden below his office window, obviously trying not to bother him. The social services employee had called twice to check on them. Harrison assured her that everything was fine, that he was handling the situation, but the truth was he wasn't. He didn't know how to talk to them, how to entertain them, how to create an environment where they wouldn't seem like frightened mice ready to scatter at the slightest noise. It was on Saturday, after a sleepless night, that Harrison made a decision. He picked up the phone and made some calls. For the first time in years, he used his network of contacts for something other than business. He urgently requested a professional nanny, someone experienced with children in delicate situations. 3 hours later, Margot Bennett rang his doorbell. She wasn't what Harrison expected. In her 50s, with short grey hair and a face lined by expression marks that spoke of many smiles, she wore practical pants, comfortable sneakers, and a bright, colourful blouse. Nothing like the formal uniform he associated with professional nannies. "Mr. Cole," she said, extending her hand in a firm handshake. "I heard you have an interesting situation on your hands." Harrison led her to the kitchen, where he briefly explained the circumstances. Margot listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding, her keen eyes taking in the environment. "And where are the girls now?" she asked when he finished. "In the garden, I believe." "They tend to stay out of the way." Margot raised an eyebrow. "I see. Well, let's go meet them." Harrison took her to the deck overlooking the backyard. The three were sitting on the grass, in a circle, talking quietly. When they noticed the adult's presence, they immediately fell silent. "Juniper, Maisie, Tess," Harrison called. "This is Mrs. Bennett. She's going to help take care of you." Margot smiled, descending the steps into the garden lightly. She crouched down in front of them, not all the way, but lowering herself enough to be on a nearer level. "You can call me Margot. I'm here to help make things more comfortable for everyone. I heard you're triplets." "That's very special." The girls regarded her suspiciously, but Margot didn't seem to mind. With a naturalness Harrison found impressive, she sat on the grass with them. "What were you playing?" she asked. "Just talking," Juniper replied warily. Well, I have a little dilemma. Do you see those flowers there?" She pointed to a nearby flower bed. "I was thinking of making a wreath, but I'd need help picking the best ones. Any volunteers?" Tess, the smallest and usually the quietest, moved almost imperceptibly forward. Margot smiled, as if that small gesture was a big victory. "Great. Let's go then." From his spot on the deck, Harrison watched, fascinated, as Margot achieved in minutes what he hadn't managed in days, a genuine smile from the girls. Soon all four of them were picking flowers, with Margot showing them how to weave simple crowns. "You should join us," Margot called casually, glancing back at Harrison. He shook his head. "I have work to do." "Go ahead." He retreated to his office, but he couldn't concentrate. From time to time, he would go to the window and watch the interaction in the garden. There was something magnetic about how Margot connected with the girls, speaking to them not as fragile children, but as people. After 2 hours, Margot knocked on the office door. Harrison invited her in. "How did it go?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "They're incredible kids," she said, sitting in the chair across from his desk. "Smart, observant, and very, very loyal to one another." Harrison nodded, not knowing what to say. "They're also scared children," Margot continued, her tone gentler. "They're trying to be invisible because they think that's what you want." The remark hit Harrison like a slap. "I didn't ask for that." "Not with words," Margot agreed. "But children are experts at reading signals. Your house is too organized and spotless. You get irritated when they make noise or touch your things." They concluded the best thing is to stay quiet and out of the way. Harrison leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of the criticism. "I don't know how to deal with children," he finally admitted. "It was a snap decision. I saw them being separated and I reacted. Now I don't know what to do." Margot smiled, not pityingly, but understandingly. "That's why I'm here. I can come every day, help establish routines, activities, but there's one condition." "What condition?" "You can't just hand the girls off to me. If you really want to help them, you need to get involved, at least a bit each day." Harrison frowned. "I don't know how to do that." "Start by watching. Then join them for a meal without checking your watch or your phone. Eventually, join in on an activity. Small steps." He considered the proposal. It wasn't what he'd planned. He'd hoped Margot would simply take over the problem, freeing him to go back to his normal life. But something in her direct, non-judgmental manner made him nod. "I can try." "Excellent. I'll prepare lunch with them now." Come join us when you're ready." After Margot left, Harrison sat for a long time, thinking. From the kitchen, he could hear the gentle sound of childish laughter mixed with Margot's calm voice. It was a strange sound in his home, but not entirely unpleasant. Maybe, he thought as he got up to join them, small steps were exactly what they all needed. Margot's presence transformed the mansion, not all at once, not dramatically, but in small moments that, like drops of water, began to fill the void between Harrison and the girls. 2 weeks had passed since she started coming daily. She established routines, created activities, and turned one of the unused bedrooms into a makeshift play area. Little by little, the girls' voices began to echo in the halls, first as timid whispers, then in gradually more comfortable tones. Harrison did his part. He watched from a distance, joined them at mealtimes, asked about their day, awkwardly but persistently. In the beginning, his attempts were met with short answers and wary looks. But persistence, even when forced, started to yield results. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, Harrison was working in his office when he heard a soft knock on the door, so light he almost missed it. "Yes," he responded, lifting his eyes from his computer screen. The door opened just a crack. Tess, the smallest of the three, peeked in with cautious eyes. "May I come in?" she asked in that nearly inaudible voice she used when she was nervous. Harrison straightened in his chair, surprised. It was the first time any of the girls had sought him out voluntarily. "Of course," he answered, trying to sound casual. "Did something happen?" Tess entered, hands hidden behind her back, shifting her weight from foot to foot. Her hair looked different. Margot had neatly redone her braids, adding small, colorful clips. "I made something," she said, still not showing what she was hiding. "Something?" Harrison repeated, puzzled. "For you," she finished, finally bringing her hands forward. It was a drawing. A regular piece of paper, like the ones Margot had bought for art activities, covered in bright markers. It showed a big house, clearly the mansion, with 4 stick figures in front. 3 were small, holding hands. The 4th was taller, standing slightly apart. Harrison took the drawing, a strange tingling sensation in his chest. "That's us," Tess explained, pointing to the figures. "Juniper, me, Maisie, and you." It was simple, like most children's drawings, but something about the image affected Harrison in a way he hadn't expected. The figure representing him stood separate from the other 3, but not entirely removed, as though within reach if he chose to get closer. "It's really good," he said, unsure how to react appropriately. "Thank you." Tess watched his face intently, as if searching for something. "Margot said we could put it on the fridge, but I thought maybe you'd want to keep it here," she explained. "To look at when you're working." Harrison looked from the drawing to the little girl, realizing how much that small gesture meant. It was an offer of connection from the quietest of the 3. "I'll put it right here," he decided, making space on the corkboard where he normally pinned only reports and memos. He fastened the colorful drawing in the center, a vibrant point against the monotony of paperwork. Tess smiled, a rare smile that completely transformed her timid face. "You don't smile much, do you?" she asked, the question coming out with the direct honesty only children have. Harrison blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" "You almost never smile." "Your mouth stays like this," she said, making a straight line with her lips, a near-comical imitation of his usual expression. Unable to help it, Harrison felt the corners of his own mouth lift. "I guess I haven't practiced much," he admitted. Tess nodded as though it made perfect sense. "It's like tying your shoelaces," she said with childlike wisdom. "If you don't practice, you forget how—" Before Harrison could respond, she had already turned and left the office, leaving him alone with the colorful drawing and a strange feeling that something important had just happened. Of that night, during dinner, Harrison noticed a subtle change. Tess looked at him occasionally and smiled, as if they shared a secret. Juniper, always the most observant, picked up on this interaction. "What happened?" she asked, while Margot poured more juice. "Tess gave me a drawing today," Harrison replied. "The one of the house." Maisie leaned forward. "She spent a long time on it." "It's really good," Harrison said, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "It's in my office now." Juniper tilted her head slightly, studying Harrison's face with those eyes that were too serious for her age. "Why don't you ever smile?" she asked, echoing Tess's observation, but with the directness only Juniper could manage. Harrison paused, fork halfway to his mouth, feeling the girls' and Margot's gazes on him. "I do smile," he defended himself, but it sounded weak even to his own ears. "Almost never," Juniper insisted, "even when something's funny." Harrison thought for a moment. When was the last time he'd truly laughed? Not just a polite smile at a business meeting, but a genuine laugh. "I guess I got used to being serious," he finally replied. "It's a hard habit to break." "Mom said smiling exercises your heart," Maisie commented, swirling her food on her plate. "Even when we're sad." Dinner went on, the conversation moving to other topics, but Harrison couldn't shake their words. Later that night, alone in his bedroom, he looked at himself in the mirror and tried to smile. It felt strange, forced, like a muscle unused for too long. A hard habit to break, indeed. The following week brought more small changes. Harrison began leaving his office earlier, spending more time in the living room where the girls usually played after dinner. He didn't actively participate, but his quiet presence was a sort of progress. On Friday, Margot surprised him by announcing she wouldn't be coming over the weekend. "I have a family commitment," she explained, while loading dishes into the dishwasher. "But I've left everything organized, prepared meals in the fridge, planned activities, you'll be fine." Harrison felt a wave of panic. An entire weekend alone with the girls. "Are you sure you can't come for at least a few hours?" he asked quietly, so the children wouldn't hear. Margot smiled in a way that suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. "I'm sure. And you'll be just fine, and Harrison, it's time for another step forward." When Margot left that afternoon, the house felt strangely empty despite the 4 people still occupying its rooms. Harrison tried to get back to work, but he couldn't concentrate. At dinner, he served the food Margot had prepared, attempting casual conversation with the girls. That night, as he accompanied them to their room, which was now decorated with brighter colors and organized toys, Harrison prepared for his usual quick good night, followed by a hasty exit. "Will you tell us a story?" Maisie asked, once all 3 were settled in the large bed Harrison had bought to replace their original makeshift arrangement. He froze in the doorway. "A story. Before bed," Maisie explained, as though it was obvious. "Margot always tells us one." Harrison looked at the 3 girls, their expectant faces, and felt a knot in his stomach. A story. What kind of story? He had never told a story in his life. He didn't know how to begin, what to say, how to spin something from thin air. "Thanks, I'm not very good at stories," he admitted. "Please," Maisie insisted, her large dark eyes impossible to refuse. Harrison took a deep breath, stepped back into the room, and awkwardly sat on the edge of the bed. "Okay," he agreed, "I'll try." He cleared his throat, feeling ridiculously nervous. "Once upon a time," he began, the phrase coming out like a question. "Once upon a time there was a man." He stopped, unsure how to continue. The girls waited patiently. "This man lived alone," Harrison continued, realizing he was basically telling his own story. "In a big house, he liked silence and order. Everything had its place." More silence. Harrison felt increasingly uncomfortable. "Then what?" Tess asked. "Then one day he'd found three birds," he improvised, feeling a cold sweat on his forehead. 3 little birds that were lost. They made a lot of noise and flew around the house, knocking things over, and... Harrison stopped again, realizing this was taking a disastrous turn. "This isn't very good, is it?" he asked, resigned. To his surprise, Maisie giggled. "We're the birds, right?" she asked. Harrison felt his face grow hot. "I guess so. Sorry, I warned you I'm no good at telling stories." Maisie's laughter grew, infecting Tess, who joined in with her soft giggle. Even Juniper, always more serious, had a smile on her lips. "You should see your face," Maisie said between laughs. "You look like you're taking a really hard test." Harrison found himself smiling, and then, to his own surprise, a laugh escaped, awkward, rusty, but genuine. And suddenly, they were all laughing together, a moment of unexpected connection born from his failure as a storyteller. "All right," he said when the laughter subsided. I guess we have to admit stories aren't my strong suit. You just need practice, Juniper encouraged, echoing Tess's earlier words about smiling. Harrison nodded, rising from the bed. He tucked the blankets around them, a gesture that was becoming increasingly natural. Good night, then, tomorrow. Maybe we can try again. The next morning, Harrison left early. He drove to the nearest mall, a place he usually avoided like the plague. He asked a bookstore clerk for advice, feeling completely out of his element in the bright children's section with its colorful shelves. He returned home carrying 2 bags full of children's books, classic tales, fairy stories, modern adventures. He spent the afternoon in his office, but not working. Instead, he practiced reading several stories, marking passages, testing different voices, preparing as though for an important presentation. That night, when the girls asked for a story, he was ready. Actually, he said, revealing one of the books he'd hidden behind his back, I brought some options. Their eyes went wide at the sight of the colorful cover and the bright illustrations. Harrison settled onto the edge of the bed, opened the chosen book, a story about a bear who couldn't sleep, and began to read. Initially, his voice was stiff, too formal. But as the story progressed, he found himself slipping into rhythm, changing his tone for different characters, making dramatic pauses at the right moments. The girls listened, fully absorbed. When Harrison closed the book, the room fell into a different kind of silence, not the uncomfortable silence of the first days, but the contented hush that follows a special moment. Can we read another tomorrow? Tess asked, and drowsy. If you'd like, he answered, surprised at how much he looked forward to it. It became a ritual. Every night, after dinner and before bed, Harrison read a story, sometimes 2, if the girls begged for just one more. With each passing day, he got better, more expressive, more confident. And the girls responded, asking questions about the stories, laughing at the funny parts, snuggling closer during scary parts. Margot watched this evolution with a satisfied smile. You're doing well, she commented one afternoon as they watched the girls play in the garden. Harrison shrugged, unable to fully hide the pride he felt. It's just reading, he said. It's not just reading, Margot corrected. It's connection. It shows them they're important enough to deserve your time and attention. He knew she was right. Storytime had become his favorite part of the day, too. A moment when he wasn't Harrison Cole the wealthy, withdrawn businessman, but simply a man reading to 3 children who, in an inexplicable way, were beginning to take up a bigger space in his life. The mansion, once a monument to silence and order, now housed different sounds. Morning laughter at breakfast, curious questions at dinner, gasps of surprise during bedtime stories, low-voiced conversations among the sisters, echoing through halls that had once been quiet. And, to his surprise, Harrison found that he didn't mind. In fact, the house had never felt so alive, or so much like a home. Storytime had become sacred. Harrison never imagined reading children's books would turn into the most anticipated part of his day. The routine was always the same. After dinner, the girls brushed their teeth, put on pajamas, and settled into bed. He arrived with a new book, sat on the edge, and transported them all to magical worlds for 20, sometimes 30 minutes. In recent weeks, Harrison noticed subtle changes in himself. How he now naturally modulated his voice for different characters, how his eyes searched the girls' faces during the most emotional moments, the warmth he felt when they scooted closer to see the illustrations, small moments of connection that would have seemed impossible before. That Thursday evening, Harrison brought a book about a family of rabbits building a house in the woods. The story was simple, with bright illustrations and a comforting message about teamwork. The girls listened with their usual focus, making occasional comments about the pictures. Look how they work together, Maisie said, pointing at the rabbits raising a wall. Their house is small to track in, but it looks cozy, Tess observed. When he finished the last page and closed the book, Harrison expected the usual chorus of one more, but instead there was a different silence. Juniper, always the most serious, seemed lost in thought, fiddling with the edge of the blanket. Did you like it? Harrison asked, noticing the change in atmosphere. Juniper lifted her gaze, meeting his with unusual intensity, even for her. "Our mum got very sick," she said abruptly, her voice almost a whisper. Harrison froze, the book still in his hands. In all these weeks, the girls had rarely mentioned their past. He knew from the social services files that they were orphans, but the details remained unclear. Margot had advised him not to push, to let them speak when they were ready. "She coughed a lot," Juniper went on, now looking at her own hands. "It started slowly. She said it was just a cold, but she never got better." The room fell silent, only the distant ticking of the large hallway clock and the soft sound of the girls breathing. Harrison realized he was holding his breath again. Maisie moved closer to her sister, as if offering silent support. Tess, on the other side, hugged her pillow tight, her big eyes glued to Juniper. Harrison set the book aside, uncertain what to say. Should he change the subject? Ask questions? The moment felt too fragile to interrupt, yet too heavy to sustain. "She couldn't go to the doctor," he finally asked, keeping his voice gentle, as though speaking to a frightened animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. "We didn't have money," Juniper explained simply, as if it were a basic fact of life like the rising sun. "She used to work cleaning houses, but then she got too weak." Her eyes, usually so steady, now seemed distant, as if seeing scenes from a past that existed only in her memory. "We lived in a tiny place," Maisie added, picking up the story, "with a stove that sometimes worked. In winter it was really cold, and in summer it was really hot." She paused, as if organizing her memories. "There was a window that faced a brick wall, but we got a bit of sunlight in the morning. Mom said it was our golden hour." Harrison felt a lump in his throat. The simplicity of how they described their poverty was more striking than any dramatic portrayal. "When Mom couldn't get out of bed anymore, we took care of her," Juniper continued. "Brought her water, food when we had any. I read stories to her that she used to read to us." A small, sad smile crossed her lips, the first Harrison had seen during this conversation. "We only had 3 books. We knew them all by heart, but we pretended to be surprised each time because she liked to see our reactions." "You read like she did," Tess said timidly, looking at Harrison, "with different voices for each character." Harrison swallowed hard, surprised by the unexpected comparison. He felt a strange warmth in his chest, unpleasant in its intensity, yet somehow significant, like something was thawing inside him. "One night, she called us in close," Juniper said, her eyes far away as she relived the memory. "She made us promise to always stay together no matter what happened. She said we were stronger together." Their small hands laced with each other's, an automatic gesture, silently reaffirming that promise. "The next morning she didn't wake up," Maisie added softly, her voice tiny. "A neighbor called people who took her away. Then they came for us too." Harrison remained still, feeling each word land on him like a physical weight. The simplicity of their telling only made it more devastating. "We ran away," Juniper admitted after a pause. "We didn't want to be sent to different places. We stayed on the streets for a while." She looked at Harrison, as if judging whether she could trust him with this information, whether he would condemn them. "It was cold at night," Maisie recalled, wrapping her arms around herself as if she could still feel that cold. "We slept in hidden spots, under bridges, in abandoned buildings. I was scared of the dark," Tess murmured, "but Juniper always stayed awake until I fell asleep." Juniper shrugged, as though it was nothing, but Harrison saw the weight of responsibility she carried. "Sometimes we were really hungry," Maisie continued, her gaze downcast. "So hungry it hurt here." She pointed to her belly. "Juniper always tried to find food for us. She said she wasn't hungry, but we knew she was." Harrison felt something wet on his hand and realized, surprised, that his own eyes were filling with tears. He quickly disguised it, pretending to rub his face. "The man from the bakery sometimes gave us old bread," Juniper added, "and a lady selling fruit would let us take the bruised ones." She paused, considering whether to continue. "Once we found a wallet on the ground, it had money inside." The 3 exchanged glances, a sudden tension between them. "We gave it back," Maisie hurried to say. "Juniper made us hand it to a police officer. She said Mom would be sad if we kept something that wasn't ours. Harrison felt a wave of admiration for Juniper, a small, hungry child, steadfast in principles that many adults in far better circumstances would abandon. We lived like that until the police found us sleeping in a park, she explained. Then we went to a shelter. It was clean, Maisie said, but there were lots of other kids, and people kept trying to separate us. Her eyes locked with Harrison's, pleading for understanding. They said it was easier to find a family for one child than for three. Tessa's voice was so low that Harrison had to lean in to hear her. But we promised Mom. She paused, her small fingers nervously gripping the edge of the pillow. I was really scared, she confessed. Scared that I'd wake up one day and not see my sisters, that I'd be completely alone. Those words hit Harrison like a physical punch. The idea of Tess, so small and fragile, alone in a strange place, separated from the only people giving her security, was unbearable. The day you found us, Juniper continued, looking directly at Harrison. They were going to take Maisie first. A family only wanted her. Harrison vividly remembered that moment on the sidewalk. Their desperation when they realized they'd be separated, the crying that had pierced all his defenses, how that sound had awakened something inside him he hadn't known existed. And then you showed up, Maisie said with a small smile, tears now rolling freely down her cheeks. Like in the books, when someone arrives just in time to save everyone. Harrison couldn't reply. A giant knot blocked his throat, and he knew if he spoke, his voice would break. Instead, he reached out and, in a gesture that was still not entirely natural to him, gently touched Maisie's hair. A pause followed, filled only by the soft sound of rain that had begun tapping against the windows. Thank you, Juniper said with that constant seriousness, for keeping our promise. The silence that followed was heavy with emotion. Harrison realized the girls were waiting for some response, some reaction to their stories. But how could he express the storm inside him? How to say that their suffering affected him in a way no distant tragedy ever had? You are very brave, he finally said, the words seeming inadequate but all he could manage. And you won't be separated. I promise. Only after the words came out did he realize the weight of what he'd just said. A promise wasn't something Harrison Cole made lightly. The implications of that commitment hung in the air between them, almost tangible. Time to sleep now, he added, tucking the blankets around them, a gesture that had become familiar over the last few weeks. He noticed his hands trembling slightly. The girls didn't seem to notice. Their faces, still marked by recent tears, showed the kind of relaxation that comes right before sleep. Good night, he whispered, leaning over to turn off the main lamp, leaving just the soft glow of the bedside lamp, as they preferred. Good night, Harrison, they answered in unison, their voices already touched by dreams. He wished them good night and left the room, leaving the door ajar as they liked. In the hallway, he leaned against the wall and finally allowed the tears to come, quiet, contained, but real. Harrison wasn't a man who cried. He couldn't remember the last time it had happened. Maybe at his father's funeral so many years ago, but even then tears had been sparse and quickly controlled. That was how he'd been raised, to believe emotion was weakness, vulnerability a flaw. But now, in the quiet of the hallway, with the distant sound of rain and the image of those three children etched in his mind, he couldn't hold back the wave of feelings surging through him. It cut his heart like nothing ever had. The pain he felt wasn't just empathy, it was something deeper, more visceral, as if somehow the suffering of those three girls had reached a place inside him he hadn't realized was still alive. He walked slowly to his office, poured himself a drink, and gazed at the rain through the window. The promise he had made echoed in his mind. It wasn't planned or calculated. It had simply emerged from some deep place within. They won't be separated. I promise. Words that changed everything. Words that turned a temporary arrangement into something much more meaningful. Words that, he now realized, were as much for himself as they were for the girls. That night, in the silent mansion, something rare happened. Harrison Cole, alone in his dark office, shed tears for pains that were not his own, but that, in some way, now were. The rain hadn't let up for 3 days. Heavy sheets of water poured from the sky, turning the garden into small ponds and drumming constantly on the mansion's rooftop. For Harrison, it was no problem. He had virtual meetings, reports to analyze, emails to answer. For 3 energetic children, however, it was quite the challenge. Margot had left early that day, something about a family medical appointment. The girls had already colored dozens of pages, completed all the puzzles available, and watched more cartoons than Harrison considered healthy. By mid-afternoon, the boredom was almost palpable. Harrison was working on his laptop in the living room, a recent concession since he used to work exclusively in his office, when he noticed 3 pairs of eyes watching him from the doorway. "Everything okay?" he asked, looking up from the screen. "We're bored," Maisie declared frankly, always the most direct of the 3. "Really bored," Tess added, sighing dramatically. Harrison glanced at the window. The rain was still relentless. "Well, what does Margot usually do when you're bored?" "Fun stuff," Maisie replied, "but today we need a special idea." "Special?" he repeated, already feeling a slight sense of apprehension. "Super special," Tess clarified, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. Juniper, who had been silent, took a step forward. "Can we build a fort?" she asked, her tone as serious as though proposing a business project. "A fort?" Harrison asked, puzzled. "Inside the house?" "With sheets and chairs," Maisie explained, growing more excited. "We saw it in one of the books you read." "We could do it in the living room," Juniper quickly added, noting his hesitation. "We promise we won't break anything." Harrison looked around, his pristine living room with expensive furniture and carefully curated artwork. The idea of turning it into an improvised building site would have horrified him weeks ago. But the hopeful looks on their faces. "I suppose we can try," he heard himself say, even surprising himself. Their faces lit up as though someone had flipped a switch. "I'll get sheets," Maisie shouted, already running down the hallway. "We need pillows," Tess exclaimed, following her sister. Juniper stayed behind, looking at Harrison with those serious eyes. "You're really going to help?" she asked, as if she still couldn't quite believe it. "I am," he replied, shutting the laptop. "Though I should warn you, I've never built a fort before." A small smile appeared on her face. "Don't worry, we'll teach you." 20 minutes later, the living room was unrecognizable. Chairs had been moved to form the basic structure. 2 lamps acted as additional pillars. Sheets and blankets were stretched between the furniture, creating a makeshift roof. Pillows covered the floor of the fort, and various cushions had been rearranged to serve as supports and backrests. Harrison, to his own astonishment, got into the spirit of it. He helped tie sheets, suggested using clips to hold the fabric in place, and even offered his stack of pricey magazines to help weigh down one corner of the wall. "We need a secret entrance," declared Maisie, critically surveying the nearly finished structure. "And a password," Tess added enthusiastically. "Maybe we can use the fringe on that rug as a kind of curtain for the entrance," Harrison suggested, surprising even himself with his enthusiasm. The girls agreed enthusiastically. With a few final adjustments, the fort was complete, a cozy, hidden space right in the middle of the elegant living room. "Now we need flashlights," Juniper said. To make it more special, Harrison rummaged through the kitchen cupboard and found 3 emergency flashlights. When he returned, the girls were already inside the fort, chatting excitedly. "May I come in?" he asked, bending down at the makeshift entrance. "What's the password?" Maisie asked, trying to look serious but failing to hide a grin. Harrison pretended to think deeply. Hopping bunnies." "No," all 3 laughed in unison. "Let me try again." "Chocolate ice cream?" More laughter. "Last try," he requested. "How about Juniper, Maisie, and Tess are the best fort builders in the world?" "That works," declared Maisie, lifting the curtain at the entrance. "You can come in." Harrison had to contort himself to fit into the cramped space, but he managed to settle among the cushions and the 3 girls. The flashlights gave it a cozy glow, casting interesting shadows on the fabric walls. "What now?" he asked, feeling oddly comfortable in this improvised hideaway. "Now we tell scary stories," Juniper replied. "Not too scary," Tess quickly added. "Just a little scary," Maisie agreed. Harrison smiled. "I think I can try a slightly scary story." He launched into a tale about a mysterious house in the woods, using the flashlight to create dramatic effects on his face. The girls listened, fully engrossed, occasionally squealing in surprise at the right moments. When he finished, Maisie told a story of her own, about a monster that turned out to be a lost dog looking for friends. Tess contributed a short tale about a girl who found a treasure on the beach. Juniper told one about 3 explorer sisters who rescued magical creatures. Time passed quickly inside the fort, with stories, laughter, and a sense of comfort Harrison had never experienced. At some point, Maisie grabbed a pillow from beneath her and playfully tossed it at Tess. "Pillow fight!" she cried, grabbing another pillow to defend herself. Before Harrison could intervene, the fort erupted into chaos, pillows flying, laughter, and joyful screams. A stray hit from Juniper landed squarely on Harrison's face. She froze, clearly worried about his reaction. To everyone's surprise, including his own, Harrison grabbed the fallen pillow and, with a mischievous grin, gently threw it back. "Oh, so that's how it is?" he asked, feigning outrage. 3 against 1. The girls screamed in delight when they realized he was joining in. The pillow fight escalated, all 4 of them laughing uncontrollably. At one point, the fort couldn't withstand all the movement and collapsed on top of them, only intensifying the joyful mayhem. When they finally stopped, exhausted, they were all lying on the floor among fallen sheets and scattered pillows. The living room was a complete mess, something that would have infuriated Harrison a month earlier. Now, though, seeing the flushed and smiling faces of the girls, he realized he didn't mind at all. In fact, he didn't want the moment to end. "That was fun," Tess declared, her small face shining with joy. "A lot of fun," Harrison agreed, surprised at the sincerity in his voice. "I think we broke the fort," Juniper noted, eyeing the collapsed structure. "We can build another tomorrow," Harrison suggested, sitting amid the wreckage. "Maybe a sturdier version that can handle pillow wars." The girls laughed, and Harrison felt something warm spread through his chest, a sense of belonging he didn't recognize, but found surprisingly pleasant. "Wait here," Maisie said suddenly, jumping up. "We have something for you." The 3 exchanged conspiratorial looks, and then Juniper and Tess also stood, following Maisie out of the living room. Left alone among the mess, Harrison took a deep breath. What was happening to him? 2 months ago, the idea of pillows on the floor and sheets tied to furniture would have horrified him. Now he felt happy. The girls returned a few minutes later, clearly hiding something behind their backs. Juniper motioned for Harrison to hold out his arm. "We made this for you," she said, as Maisie placed something on his wrist. It was a bracelet, obviously handmade, braided with colorful yarn. A few plastic beads had been added here and there, creating tiny, shimmering details. "Margot taught us how to make them," Tess explained. "We worked on it for 3 days. "It's a friendship bracelet," Maisie added. "We have one too." They held out their arms, showing similar bracelets, each with slightly different colors. "So we're kind of a team," Juniper said softly. "All of us together." Harrison looked at the bracelet. Simple, colorful, made by small hands with a level of focus he could imagine. It was not the sort of accessory he'd ever consider wearing. It was childish, homemade, unsophisticated. And yet, it was the most precious gift he'd received in years. "It's perfect," he said, his voice oddly rough. "I'll wear it all the time." The smiles he got in return were worth more than any deal he'd ever closed. The following Sunday, the sun finally emerged, chasing away the clouds that had dominated the sky for days. Harrison decided it was time for an outing. "How about a trip?" he suggested during breakfast. "We can go to the mall, have lunch out." The girl's eyes widened at the idea. "Like a real trip?" Maisie asked, nearly bouncing in her seat. "A real trip," Harrison confirmed, smiling at their excitement. The yarn bracelet still on his wrist, he made no effort to hide it. Margot, who was serving pancakes, gave an approving nod. "Great idea. It's a perfect day for going out." The mall wasn't the kind of place Harrison frequented for pleasure. Normally, if he needed something, he shopped online or sent someone to pick it up. But watching the girls' amazed expressions as they entered the building filled with shops, lights and sounds made each moment worthwhile. "It's so big," Tess exclaimed, clutching Harrison's hand while looking around as though worried she might get lost. "Look at all the stores," Maisie said, pointing in every direction. Juniper, true to her responsible sister role, tried to keep a composed expression, but her shining eyes betrayed her excitement. "Where should we go first?" Harrison asked, realizing he felt just as enthusiastic. "Can we eat?" Maisie suggested, always practical when it came to food. Harrison checked his watch, almost noon. "Perfect time for lunch. How about a fast food place?" He led them to the food court, where the girls' eyes seemed to want to take in everything at once. There were so many options: pizza, burgers, Chinese, Mexican, and Harrison realized that for children who had once had so little, this abundance must feel almost magical. "You can choose whatever you want," he said, pointing to the different counters. After much deliberation and many questions about what each dish was, they decided on burgers, fries, and milkshakes. Harrison placed the orders, and soon they were seated at a table, trays piled with food. "It's so big," Tess exclaimed, eyes wide at her burger. "Are we really allowed to eat all this?" Juniper asked, as though suspecting some trick. "Of course," Harrison assured her. "If you can't finish, that's okay. The important thing is to enjoy." The first sip of milkshake brought looks of surprise and delight. The fries disappeared fast. The burgers were devoured enthusiastically, though Tess needed help holding hers. Harrison watched, fascinated by how something as simple as a meal at a mall could bring so much joy. Juniper, usually so contained, had a bit of ketchup at the corner of her mouth. Maisie was slurping her milkshake loudly, laughing at herself. Tess tried to copy her sister, ending up with whipped cream on her nose. "Best food ever," Maisie declared, raising a fry like a trophy. Harrison laughed, a sound becoming more frequent in his life. "Wait until you try the ice cream for dessert," he said, feeling genuine delight at the excitement his words caused. After lunch, he took them to a toy store. The girls' reaction was almost comical. They froze at the entrance, wide-eyed, as though they had just walked into a magical world. "Can we look around?" Juniper asked, as if afraid to touch anything and break it. "Of course, and you can each pick something you like," Harrison replied. The three exchanged incredulous looks, as if they couldn't believe what they were hearing. "Like a gift?" Maisie asked, clearly needing confirmation. "Exactly like a gift," Harrison confirmed. What followed was a careful, awe-filled exploration of each aisle. Tess lingered over a shelf of stuffed animals, stroking them reverently. Maisie gravitated toward a row of board games, firing off countless questions about how they worked. Juniper studied a collection of building blocks, examining the illustrations on each box with intense concentration. Harrison followed them, answering questions, explaining how things worked. Surprised by how gently they handled the items, none of the demanding urgency he often saw in children at toy stores. After much debate, Tess chose a plush bunny with kind eyes. Maisie opted for a board game about forest adventures, and Juniper selected a set of blocks with instructions for building different animals. "Are you sure these are your choices?" Harrison asked, secretly impressed by how sensible they were. "You can each pick one more item if you'd like." Their eyes widened again. "One more," Juniper repeated, as though she couldn't believe it. Harrison nodded, feeling a strange emotion at seeing how much happiness something so basic could bring them, when, for many children, this was just normal. Their next stop was a bookstore. Harrison noticed how naturally they gravitated to the colorful shelves in the children's section, with the same reverent caution they'd shown in the toy store. "Books are special," Juniper explained, when Harrison commented on how gently they turned the pages. "Mum always said books are gateways to other places." He felt that familiar tightness in his chest whenever they mentioned their mother. "She was right," he agreed. "Pick whichever ones you like." They spent almost an hour in the bookstore, the girls flipping through book after book, asking questions about stories and characters. Harrison answered patiently, amazed at how genuinely interested he was in their opinions and preferences. When they finally left the mall, loaded with bags of books and toys, the girls were tired, but glowing with excitement. In the car on the way home, Harrison watched in the rearview mirror as they admired their new treasures, talking in soft, animated voices, worn out but happy. A strange realization came over him, This had been one of the most pleasant days he'd had in years. No business calls, no stressful meetings, no constant pressure of corporate expectations. Just a few simple hours with 3 children, eating fast food and picking out toys. And more surprisingly, he realized that when he was away from them during the week, attending outside meetings, business dinners he couldn't postpone, he missed them. He missed Maisie's questions at breakfast, Tess's shy smile when he got home, Juniper's seriousness that disguised a deep sensitivity. He glanced at the colorful yarn bracelet on his wrist, the constant reminder of the bond that had formed among them. He thought of the sheet forts, the bedtime stories, the Sunday pancakes. For the first time, the question formed clearly in his mind. Could he be a father? Not just a temporary guardian, not just a short-term solution until the system found another place for them, but a real father. The idea, which would have seemed absurd 2 months ago, now didn't feel so impossible. In fact, for the first time in his adult life, Harrison Cole felt he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The final adoption hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks from now. Harrison faced the process with a mix of anxiety and anticipation, feeling uncharacteristically nervous, who negotiated million-dollar deals without blinking. But this was different. It wasn't just money or business at stake, but the future of 3 children. His future with them. Family lawyer Caroline Winters had been clear. They needed all possible documentation, including the girls' complete records, birth certificates, medical documents, the background of how Child Protective Services got involved. Everything would be scrutinized by the judge. "I need you to review these to see if there are any errors or omissions," Caroline explained, handing Harrison a thick folder. "The more information we have, the stronger our position." On that Tuesday evening, after the girls went to bed, Harrison sat in his office to review everything. Birth certificates, incomplete school records, sparse medical reports. The poverty they had experienced was evident in every gap, every missing page. It was in the 3rd hour of reviewing that Harrison found it, an older document from when the girls were born. The hospital record listed the mother's full name, Isadora Elise Martinez. The world stopped. Harrison stared at the name, feeling as though he'd been punched in the stomach. Isadora. It couldn't be a coincidence, not with that distinctive name, not with the matching timeline, not with the feeling he'd had from the very first moment he saw the girls. With trembling hands, he searched the back of his desk drawer, a small box, almost forgotten that he hadn't opened in years. Inside were a few old photographs, yellowed letters, and a cheap little ring he'd never had the heart to throw away. And there she was, smiling in a faded photo, dark, flowing hair, large, expressive eyes he now recognized in Maisie. The smile he sometimes saw on Tess when she felt safe, the determined set of Juniper's chin. Isadora. His first true love. The woman he had let go 15 years ago, when his career had seemed more important than anything else. "Oh my God," he whispered to the empty office. "How could I not see it before?" The resemblance was subtle, but undeniable. They weren't exact copies. Each girl had her own unique traits, but now that he knew, it seemed so obvious it hurt. Harrison spent the rest of the night poring over documents, searching for more information. The father wasn't mentioned anywhere, meaning Isadora had raised the girls alone. The medical reports showed a severe pneumonia diagnosis, worsened by a compromised immune system. The date of death matched what the girls had told him. When the sun rose, Harrison was still awake, surrounded by papers and memories. He felt dazed, as though living in a fever dream. Margot arrived at 8:00 as usual and immediately noticed something was wrong. "Harrison, are you okay?" she asked, finding him still in his office, eyes red, unshaven. "I need a day," he replied, his voice hoarse. "Could you stay with the girls? Tell them I had an emergency at work." "Sure, but what happened?" Harrison just shook his head, unable to put the storm inside him into words. How to explain that fate had mocked him in the cruelest way possible? That the woman he'd let go, perhaps the only one he'd truly loved, had died in poverty while he amassed fortunes. That the children he now loved as his own were, in fact, her daughters. "I just need time to process," he finally said. Margot nodded, worried but respecting his space. "I'll look after them. Take the time you need." Harrison locked himself in the office, ignoring calls, emails, even meals. He sat by the window, Isadora's photograph in one hand, a whiskey in the other. The memories returned in painful waves. Isadora at 20, a literature student, working as a waitress to pay for college. He, newly graduated in business, starting what would become his empire. Their chance meeting at the cafe where she worked. Her smile that captivated him from the first moment. 2 years together. 2 years of intense love, future plans, whispered promises in the dark. Then came the big opportunity, a job offer in another city, the first step toward the success he so desperately wanted. Isadora couldn't go. She was in the middle of her course, had family responsibilities. "We can try long distance," she had suggested, her eyes already brimming with tears. "It would be unfair to both of us," he'd replied, convinced it was the mature, rational decision. The truth was that he hadn't wanted anchors or complications. His career came first. It always came first. He'd convinced himself the love would fade, that others would come. But no other love had ever come. No other woman touched him the way she had. Over time, he convinced himself love was an unnecessary distraction, that solitude was a choice rather than a consequence. And now this, her daughters, under his roof. 3 pieces of Isadora, alive, breathing, bringing color and sound to a house that had always been as empty as his life. Downstairs, Margot tried to keep the girls' routine normal, but they sensed something was wrong. Breakfast was quiet, all of them casting glances at Harrison's empty chair. "He had a work emergency," Margot explained when Tess asked for the 3rd time where Harrison was. "Sometimes grown-ups have complicated problems to solve." "Will he be back for dinner?" Maisie asked, trying to sound casual but clearly worried. "I'm not sure, dear. We'll see." The day dragged on. The girls were quieter than usual, playing without their usual excitement. At lunch, Juniper barely touched her food. "Is he mad at us?" she finally asked, looking directly at Margot. "Of course not," Margot replied quickly. "Why would he be?" Juniper shrugged, poking at her meal with a fork. "Sometimes adults get tired of us." Margot's heart clenched. "Harrison isn't tired of you. He just needs some time to figure some things out." That afternoon, as Margot helped Tess with a drawing in the living room, she noticed Juniper and Maisie speaking softly in the corner. "What if he changed his mind?" Maisie asked, her voice trembling. "He wouldn't do that," Juniper replied, but without much conviction. "He promised." "Lots of people promise things," Maisie said. "Remember that social worker who said she'd visit us every week and never came back?" Margot pretended not to hear, but it made her heart ache for them. She knew all too well the scars that abandonment left behind. By nightfall, with no sign of Harrison, the 3 girls looked even more downcast. It was bedtime, that special time they always shared reading a story with Harrison. "Do you want me to read you something?" Margot offered. 3 heads shook silently. "We can wait for him," Tess said, hugging the bunny plush Harrison had bought at the mall. "He might be really busy today," Margot replied gently. "You need to sleep." Reluctantly, they went to bed. Margot read them a story, but it wasn't the same. They listened politely but kept glancing at the door, waiting. Later, when Margot thought they were asleep, she returned to check on them. She stopped at the partially open door, hearing their low voices. "Did we do something wrong?" Tess asked, her voice small and uncertain. "No," Juniper answered firmly, though Margot could hear the underlying doubt. "He's just busy." "But he never spent a whole day without talking to us," Maisie insisted. "Not even when he had that big meeting in another city." A pause, and then Juniper's voice, not quite so certain. "Did we annoy him?" The question hung in the air, laden with fear and insecurity. Margot was about to enter and comfort them when she sensed a presence behind her. She turned to find Harrison standing in the hallway, pale, looking devastated. Clearly, he had heard them. For a moment, they stood there, frozen, while the girls' low voices continued on the other side of the door, trying to console each other with ever less convincing reassurances. Harrison closed his eyes briefly, pain evident in every line of his face. Then, without a word, he turned and went back to his office. Margot hesitated, torn between following him or going in to comfort the girls. She chose the latter, making a mental note to confront him later. Whatever crisis he was having, the girls didn't deserve to suffer for it. Back in his office, Harrison dropped heavily into the chair, feeling the weight of everything he'd heard. Did we annoy him? Juniper's question rang in his mind, twisting the already tight knot in his chest. They thought they had done something wrong, that he was rejecting them, as so many others had. The pattern of abandonment their short lives already knew so well. What an idiot I am, he muttered to himself, running his hands over his tired face. He looked again at Isadora's photograph. So young, so full of life. He had never known what became of her after he left. He had never tried to find out. He'd preferred to bury that chapter, convincing himself it was best for both of them. And now he discovered she had had 3 daughters. Raised them alone in poverty, fought illness until the last moment, making them promise to stay together. Life had gone by so fast, 15 years that felt like 15 days. While he amassed fortunes, Isadora fought to survive. Such a stark contrast, he could hardly bear it. Then, by some inexplicable miracle, by some twist of fate he didn't deserve, her daughters ended up in his life. That moment on the sidewalk, that impulse he couldn't explain. It hadn't been coincidence. It was as though an invisible force had pushed him toward them. Tears he hadn't shed in years now came freely. For the first time, Harrison allowed himself to grieve the loss of Isadora that he had never processed. For the first time, he realized that what he felt for the girls wasn't just compassion or responsibility. It was a deeper connection, as though, in a mysterious way, he had returned to Isadora's life through them. And maybe, he thought, as he looked at the photo one last time before putting it away, maybe it wasn't coincidence at all. Maybe it was a chance to make right what had been lost, to honor what might have been, to do what Isadora would have wanted for her daughters. For all the opportunities he missed, for all the years wasted, for all the roads not taken, fate was now offering him a second chance, and this time he wouldn't let it slip away. Harrison spent the night in his office, sleep coming only in brief, restless intervals. When the sun rose, he had made his decision. He couldn't change the past or bring Isadora back, but he could honor her memory in the only way that mattered, by loving her daughters as if they were his own, which, he realized with crystal clarity, they already were. Morning came slowly. Harrison heard the familiar sounds of the house waking, the light footsteps of the girls upstairs, Margot's calm voice preparing breakfast, the clinking of plates and silverware. He remained in the office, organizing his thoughts, gathering his courage. When he finally went downstairs, he found Margot in the kitchen. "They're in the living room," she said before he could ask. There was a coolness in her tone that Harrison knew he deserved. Drawing, "They've been very quiet. Thank you for taking care of them," he said. "I know I must seem like a jerk right now." Margot's face softened slightly. "I don't know what happened, Harrison, but I know you have a good heart. Just remember they do too, and they're much more fragile than yours." He nodded, feeling the weight of the small box in his shirt pocket. "I'm going to talk to them now." Harrison paused at the entrance of the living room, observing for a moment. The 3 girls sat on the floor around the coffee table, focused on their sheets of paper. Juniper was drawing neat lines, tongue peeking out in concentration. Maisie used as many colors as possible, creating a vibrant whirlwind of shapes. Tess worked meticulously on something partially hidden by her arm. They looked so small, so vulnerable, yet at the same time so resilient. They'd survived more than any child should have to. "May I join you?" he asked, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. 3 heads lifted simultaneously. Surprise flickered across their faces, quickly replaced by a mix of emotions, relief, caution, hope. "Sure," Juniper said, trying to sound casual, though Harrison could see the tension in her small shoulders. He sat on the floor with them, aware of how impossible this simple act would have been for him 3 months ago. The man who tolerated no clutter, who maintained distant relationships, who had built walls so high he could no longer climb them. "I'm drawing a dragon," Maisie said, breaking the silence and sliding her picture toward him. It breathes rainbow fire instead of normal fire. That's amazing, Harrison replied, genuinely impressed by her imagination. I love the details on the wings. Maisie smiled, some of her usual spark returning to her eyes. Harrison took a deep breath. The moment he had rehearsed in his mind had arrived. I have something to show you, he began, pulling the small box from his pocket, and something important to tell you. They all set their pencils down, fully focused on him. Harrison opened the box and carefully removed a photograph. This picture was taken a long time ago, he explained, holding it so they could see. In the image, a much younger Harrison, with longer hair and a carefree smile, stood beside a young woman with dark hair and a radiant smile. They were holding hands in front of a field of sunflowers, the sun creating a golden halo around them. That, Tess began, her eyes wide, voice almost a whisper. It's Mom, Juniper finished, not as a question but a statement. Harrison nodded, feeling that familiar knot in his throat. That was your mother, he confirmed. Isadora. The three scooted closer, gazing at the photograph like it was a precious treasure. Maisie reached out, gently touching her mother's face in the picture. You knew our Mom? She asked, confused. Harrison inhaled deeply. She was very important to me, he said, the words difficult to get out. We met a long time ago, and although life separated us, I think somehow fate brought me back to her, through you. Another moment of complete silence, the three absorbing what they had just learned. Harrison waited, his heart pounding. Is that why you took us that day? Juniper finally asked, her sharp eyes on him. No, he replied honestly. That day I didn't know. I only found out recently while reviewing your documents for the adoption. More silence. Harrison could almost see the gears turning in their heads, connecting dots, formulating questions. You three have her eyes, he went on softly. And her smile. Especially you, Tess, when you feel safe. And Maisie has her laugh, and Juniper. You have the same determined expression she got whenever she made up her mind about something. Juniper scooted closer, her gaze never leaving Harrison's. In a move that startled him, she reached out and took his hand. Did you love her? She asked, direct as ever. Harrison felt his eyes burn. Yes, he said simply, very much. Tess moved then, circling the table to sit beside him. Without speaking, she rested her head on his shoulder, a gesture of comfort so pure and simple that Harrison had to fight back tears. Maisie stayed where she was, but her face showed a small, shy smile, her eyes shining with contained emotion. I need you to know something, Harrison said, looking at each of them. When I first brought you here that day, it was on impulse. I didn't want you separated, but now... He paused, searching for the right words, the true words. I want to take care of you, not just for her, but because I love you. But I want to be your family. The word love hung in the air, simple and so powerful. Harrison couldn't recall the last time he'd said it to anyone, perhaps to Isadora, so many years ago. Like a real dad, Tess asked, her voice small against his shoulder. If you'll have me, yes, he answered. A real dad. Juniper's eyes filled with tears, something very rare for her. Mom would have liked that, she said quietly, knowing we're with you. It felt as though an invisible weight lifted from Harrison's shoulders. I've officially filed for adoption, he explained, but I wanted to make sure it was what you wanted too. We do, Juniper answered, speaking for all of them. Maisie stood and walked around the table to sit on Harrison's other side. Does that mean we get to stay forever? She asked. Forever, Harrison confirmed. 4 hands, 1 big, 3 small, met in the center, on top of the photograph, a silent promise, a circle completed, a new beginning. As he embraced all 3, Harrison felt a certainty he had never experienced. He had made many important decisions, closed critical deals, taken massive financial risks, but this was different. This was the choice that would define not just his future, but theirs, and this time, he was making it with his whole heart. Morning broke clear and bright, as though the sky itself knew the importance of that Monday. Harrison woke before his alarm after a restless night. It wasn't a negative anxiety keeping him alert, but an almost childlike anticipation, like Christmas Eve excitement. Today was the final adoption hearing. He prepared with the same care he would devote to a crucial negotiation, but for completely different reasons. The impeccable suit wasn't an armor to impress competitors, but a gesture of respect for the moment that would change 4 lives forever. Upstairs, Margot helped the girls get ready. They'd bought new dresses for the occasion. Juniper chose a simple, classic navy blue. Maisie picked an aqua green with little embroidered flowers, and Tess went for soft pink, her new favorite color. When they came down for breakfast, Harrison's heart pounded. They looked beautiful, their hair carefully brushed, their faces a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "Don't you look wonderful?" he said, truly impressed. "You look handsome too," Tess replied, ever generous with compliments. Harrison smiled, adjusting the tie the girls had picked for him the previous week, blue with small yellow details. "Ready?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Are we going to be a real family?" Maisie asked as they got into the car. "We already are," Harrison said. "Today just makes it official." Caroline Winters, the lawyer, was waiting for them on the courthouse steps. Dressed in a grey suit with a leather briefcase in hand, she embodied legal efficiency. "Everything's ready," she assured them. "All the paperwork is in order, the social reports are excellent, and Judge Harris is in a good mood today." The inside of the courthouse was imposing, with its dark wooden panels and high ceiling. The girls clung to Harrison's hands, momentarily intimidated as they walked down the corridor. "Is it like a church?" Tess whispered. "Sort of," Harrison said quietly. "It's an important place where people make promises they have to keep." Judge Harris's hearing room was less daunting, smaller, more welcoming, with windows letting in sunlight. The judge, a middle-aged woman with keen eyes and a kind smile, greeted them with a nod as they entered. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Eleanor Harris," the bailiff announced, and everyone stood. The judge took her seat and smiled at the girls before formally starting the session. "We're here today to finalize the adoption of Juniper, Maisie, and Tess Martinez by Mr. Harrison Cole," she stated. "I have thoroughly reviewed the reports and documents submitted." She looked directly at Harrison. "Mr. Cole, would you like to say anything before we proceed?" Harrison felt a knot in his throat. He had a short speech prepared, had rehearsed the words, but now, facing the real moment, all his practice felt inadequate. He looked at the 3 girls beside him, Juniper, sitting upright with alert eyes, Maisie, barely containing her energy, Tess, small and quiet, her expression a blend of hope and fear. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steadier than he expected. "When I found these 3 children 4 months ago, it was an impulse that made me intervene. I saw 3 sisters about to be separated, and something inside me just reacted." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "But what started as an impulse became the most deliberate decision I've ever made. These girls came into my life when I didn't even know I needed them. They taught me about courage, about loyalty, about what really matters." His voice caught slightly. "I'm not adopting them out of pity or on a whim. I'm adopting them because they taught me how to love, and because I can't imagine my life without them now." Judge Harris watched him for a long moment, then turned to the girls. "Juniper, Maisie, Tess, do you understand what's happening here today?" Juniper nodded, naturally taking the role of spokesperson. "Mr. Harrison is going to be our dad forever," she replied. "We're going to be a real family." "Is that what you want?" the judge asked gently. Juniper looked at her sisters, then at Harrison, and finally back to the judge. Her eyes, usually so guarded, brimmed with emotion. "More than anything in the world," she said with a conviction that made Harrison's heart tighten. The judge smiled, satisfied. She glanced at a few documents on her desk and then lifted her gaze. "Having reviewed all reports and heard these statements, it is my pleasure to approve this adoption." She picked up her gavel. "From this moment, Juniper, Maisie, and Tess are legally the daughters of Harrison Cole, with all corresponding rights and privileges. Congratulations to the new Cole family." The gavel's bang echoed through the room, official and final. For a moment, no one moved. Then, as if responding to an invisible cue, the 3 girls stood simultaneously and threw themselves at Harrison, small arms wrapped around him, around his neck, his waist, clinging to him as though afraid he might vanish. Harrison hugged them back, feeling the tears he had tried so hard to hold finally break free. "We're a real family now," Tess whispered against his shoulder. "Forever," Harrison replied, his voice thick with emotion. Judge Harris, observing with a smile, gave a discreet nod to the court photographer, who captured the moment. Harrison, embracing the three girls, all their faces shining with smiles and tears. The first official photo of the Cole family. As they left the courthouse, the afternoon sun bathed them in a golden light. Harrison felt weightless, as though he were floating. The girls bounded ahead, descending the steps, already seeming different, more secure, more free. "What now?" Margot asked, who had accompanied them to the exit. Harrison looked at the three girls, their expectant faces turned toward him. "Now," he declared, grinning broadly, "we celebrate." First stop was the biggest ice cream parlor in town, an elegant place with dozens of exotic and classic flavors, where the bowls were served topped with fruit, colorful sprinkles, and tiny sugar umbrellas. "You can choose any flavor," Harrison said, watching their eyes widen at the brightly lit display. Choosing took time and thought. Maisie opted for a daring pistachio and raspberry combination. Juniper, after careful deliberation, chose Belgian chocolate and salted caramel. Tess, after changing her mind several times, settled on vanilla with strawberry sauce and cookie crumbs. Harrison ordered himself a mint chocolate chip sundae, Isadora's favorite, he recalled with a bittersweet smile. Sitting at the table by the window, the sun casting golden patterns through the glass, they devoured their ice cream amid laughter and excited chatter. Maisie ended up with whipped cream on her face, making everyone laugh when she tried to lick it off. Tess spilled strawberry topping on her new dress, and rather than crying as she might have weeks ago, simply shrugged and kept enjoying her dessert. "Best day of my life," Maisie announced between spoonfuls, beaming. Harrison watched the three, feeling a fullness of heart he'd never known. How many important meetings, how many million-dollar deals had passed through his life without giving him a fraction of this joy? After the ice cream parlor, they went to the city's Central Park. The day was perfect, not too hot, not too cold, with a light breeze rustling the leaves. The girls ran through the grass, forgetting their formal dresses in favor of sheer freedom. "Look, there's a photographer." Maisie pointed to a man with a professional camera taking family portraits in the park. Harrison didn't hesitate. Minutes later, they were all posing under a big oak tree, the girls in front, Harrison behind, then all together, then making silly faces, and finally Harrison's favorite, him kneeling on the grass with the three girls around him, their heads close, all smiling genuinely. "I want this one in the living room," he said as he checked the digital image. Framed, nice and big. On their way out of the park, they found a stand selling stuffed toys. Tess's eyes lit up at the sight of a particularly huggable brown bear. "3 bears, please," Harrison told the vendor, to the girls' delight. Juniper chose a silver-gray bear with a bow tie. Maisie went for a golden plush bear with a green ribbon. Tess clung to the brown one, burying her face in its soft fur. "I'll call him Mr. Cuddles," she declared solemnly. The day continued with more adventures. A short boat ride on the park's lake, colorful cotton candy shared amid laughter, a brief scare when Tess nearly fell off a swing, but was promptly saved by Harrison. When the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and pink, Harrison realized he had never celebrated anything so profoundly before. Contracts, deals, acquisitions, all seemed trivial compared to this day, to this celebration of human connection and family found. "Time to head home," he finally announced, noticing the girls' tired faces despite their protests. "Our home," Maisie corrected with a satisfied smile. On the way back to the car, they walked hand in hand, Harrison in the middle, holding Juniper's and Maisie's hands, and Tess holding Maisie's. 4 people, 4 connected hands, a real family heading home. In the days that followed, the mansion underwent more transformations. Harrison had been secretly planning the girls' new bedroom for weeks, working with an interior designer whenever they were at their recently started school. "I have a surprise for you," he announced that Friday after the hearing, guiding them down the corridor with their eyes covered. When they finally looked, their shouts of excitement were immediate. The old guest room was gone. The once neutral beige walls now displayed a soft gradient, from sky blue near the ceiling down to green near the floor, with small hand-painted flowers near the baseboards. 3 individual beds, each with spreads in the girls' favorite colors, replaced the large shared bed. One wall was lined with a shelf brimming with books. A small art area with a low table and drawing supplies was set up by the window to capture natural light. "It's magical," Tess whispered, her eyes huge as she spun slowly, taking in every detail. "There's a bed for each of us," Juniper noted, touching the navy blue duvet. "But they're still close," Harrison quickly added. "So you can talk to each other before bed if you want." "Is this our room forever?" Maisie asked, her voice revealing the lingering fear that everything might be temporary. Harrison knelt to their level. "Forever," he confirmed. "This is our home, and this is your room for as long as you want it. And there's one more part to the surprise." He led them to a large blank panel on one wall. "This wall is yours to decorate however you want. You can paint it, stick up photos, create a mural, whatever you like. It's your space to make art." Their eyes sparkled with possibilities. They spent the rest of the day planning what they'd do with that blank space, discussing colors, themes, designs. Harrison watched, amazed by their creativity and enthusiasm, thinking how his house, once so perfect and sterile, had never felt so alive. The following week settled into a new routine: school, homework, the swimming lessons they had asked to take together. The house was filled with more and more signs of life: magnet drawings on the fridge, children's shoes in the entryway, laughter echoing through once quiet corridors. Harrison discovered he didn't mind the occasional mess, the paint splatters on the bathroom floor, the toys sometimes left on the couch. Every small sign of disorder was also a sign of life, of presence, of family. Sunday mornings became pancake day, a chaotic activity usually ending with flour all over the floor and laughter everywhere. Harrison, who had once hired others to cook for him, now found pleasure in making simple meals with his daughters. One lovely autumn afternoon, Harrison stood in the living room watching the girls play in the garden through the window. His gaze fell on the fireplace, where a framed drawing by Tess now rested. 4 figures holding hands, 1 large, 3 small, all smiling beneath a bright yellow sun. Juniper had helped Tess label the figures beneath each shape. Daddy, Juniper, Maisie, Tess. The word Daddy still sent a tremor through him each time he heard or read it. From outside, he heard laughter as Maisie apparently found a frog near the small pond. Harrison smiled, seeing Juniper approach cautiously while Tess hopped around excitedly. He ran his fingers over the colorful yarn bracelet on his wrist, already worn from constant use, but still intact. He thought of the man he used to be: organized, efficient, wealthy, and utterly empty inside. A man who measured success in numbers on a spreadsheet, who kept everyone at arm's length, who had forgotten how to feel. He looked out at the garden again, at the 3 girls who had transformed his life. A sense of peace washed over him. Not the absence of noise or clutter that he once confused with peace, but a deeper calm, the sense of being exactly where he was meant to be. For the first time in his adult life, Harrison Cole knew with absolute certainty he was no longer alone. Now he had a family, and he was completely, irrevocably happy about it. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like, because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.